Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Niger Innis Presents The Trump Revolution, a part of the TvAbraham network. Well, my God, folks, all across the country, 50% of the country is being drowned in snow and frigid temperatures, but that is not stopping the people of Minneapolis for having another day of protest. Some would say another day of obstruction of ICE. They would say a protest against ICE that have ramped up even more intensely since the killing of Miss Good, which we're all familiar with. Well, I figure with all these discussions of sanctuary cities and political asylum and border crossings, that we need to take it from the very abstract and bring it to the personal. That's why I'm so pleased that we have on as a guest today Miss Elena Suhir, who is an international affairs expert with degrees in international relations from the George Washington University and New York University. She's had a rewarding career traveling extensively on behalf of major financial and civil society institutions in both public and private sectors. But believe it or not, that's not the most dramatic part of Elena's history. Elena's family escaped from the Soviet communist regime when she was just a child, thanks to the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. When exiting the USSR, their passports were viciously shredded, rendering her family as stateless refugees, totally in limbo. Several days after their train carried them over the Soviet border to safety in Poland, in December 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan and shut down all immigration for years to come. So they were blessed and lucky to leave when they did. The Soviet government labeled them traitors, and they were forbidden from ever setting foot again in the Soviet Union until Gorbachev reformed those policies in the mid-80s. While in refugee housing in Europe, they applied for permission to emigrate to the United States. As part of their application process, they were required to undergo a series of cognitive and health tests to determine their eligibility for American residency. They waited in limbo for half a year until they finally were allowed to enter the United States in the summer of 1980 when she was just 10 years old. Their life in the United States began in a homeless shelter in Brooklyn, where I witnessed a street murder a few days after the arrival. That's quite a welcome. Her immigrant's journey and others' immigrants' journey to becoming American can be and often is treacherous for those who uproot their lives to face uncertainty. They commit to escaping repressive regimes with no way back. For those grateful immigrants who come to America despite the hardships, there is no greater reward than gaining the freedoms and opportunities to enjoy life in this great country. Elena, that is a heck of a story. I welcome you to the program.
Thank you, Niger. It's great to be here. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
Always great to see you as well. Just a little side note, Elena and I have been buddies since the early 90s. So we've known each other for a number of years, and she's as terrific as her bio suggests. Elena, first, before we get to your
You
personal
are more
story,
terrific.
before we get to your personal story, I would love to hear your thoughts about what's happening in Minneapolis and other urban centers across the country. Do you lean more towards these protests are an obstruction of ICE just doing their jobs, or do you see these protests having a legitimate human rights endeavor?
Well, these protests are definitely chaotic. And the reason that they are so chaotic and result in so much unnecessary, unwarranted violence is because there is no cooperation from the local security forces with the federal forces not because it's warranted or legal, but in fact it is unwarranted. They should be cooperating. They had always cooperated under previous presidents,
Administration.
under
Yeah.
previous administrations. President Obama deported a lot more people.
Per
Than,
capita, he deported more than Trump and Biden.
and he had 8 years to do it, and he deported people for not necessarily only criminals. He deported people, and I know people like that who had their spouses or whoever relatives deported just because they didn't have their paperwork in order. So this is completely provoked and completely unnecessary and very sad. You know, immigrants come to this country. One of the main reasons that immigrants come to this country is for law and order and for a level playing field when it comes to enforcement of laws. This is not something that is welcomed by immigrants in America for the most part. I guarantee that. We
Well,
come
I
here
want to.
because we want peace and we want security and we don't want criminals in our midst. And we
That's right.
expect the government on all levels to get rid of, to reduce, eliminate, if possible, crime. And this is completely uncalled for, unnecessary, and political.
Well, 2 points. You make a brilliant point that the reason immigrants come here, often they're escaping dictatorships, and they're escaping dictatorships where the rule of law doesn't exist. It's the rule of man, often
Or it's
one way.
arbitrary. Yep.
Well, yeah, it's completely arbitrary. And the reason they come here is because they say here in the United States, you have a country that is ruled by the rule of law, not the rule of man, and that everybody is equal under the law. And you make another point that I want to comment on, which is that, these local law enforcement entities are not cooperating with ICE. It's more than that. They are under a regime called sanctuary cities, where essentially the state governments say we are purposefully ignoring and obstructing federal immigration law to allow illegal aliens to exist within their midst. Elena, let's go into your situation because you came here and your family immigrated to the United States the right way, the legal way. You didn't just come here and say, "Hey, I want amnesty," or come here and say, I want some new immigration reform package that will make me legal all of a sudden." You went through an arduous, dramatic process to become an American citizen.
Absolutely right. When we were applying to enter the United States, it was myself, my small little brother who was about 1 year old, my parents, and my grandmother. This was under the Carter administration. And under the Carter administration, they were revising immigration quotas. Back then, as I think was the correct approach, they interviewed everyone in the family unit who was applying to enter the United States, and they would allow someone to come to America and immediately be put on SSI or other social welfare programs if they were in the position of my grandmother, who had been a retired school teacher, and to compensate for her being put on, and she was extraordinarily grateful and cognizant of this. For every one person like that, there were two people like my parents who would immediately be eligible to seek employment and would not be a long-term burden on the American taxpayer. There were, of course, and thankfully, temporary programs like food stamps, but they were intended to be just that, temporary and short term, and were
A
consequently,
trampoline instead of a hammock.
that's right, and they were, and they we were extremely grateful for that. And I remember my mother using food stamps. Back then, they were not electronic. They were, stamps that you actually pay with. So there had to be a test like that, that we would not be a burden to the taxpayer when we enter the United States and had long-term prospects to be productive, grateful citizens. There were also health tests to make sure we didn't have communicable diseases. All that, um, even though that was something that was very active under the Carter administration, all that seems to have gone by the wayside. And now we have a floodgate of people who are escaping, no doubt, dangerous regimes, but some of them may themselves be dangerous. And within that, there's no sift mechanism for that. And I guarantee that most legal immigrants, most immigrants in this country, and we need immigrants. I joke with my husband, who's American, all the time, is that it's really the Americans that don't appreciate their country and that ruin this country. So we need immigrants. So when you have people taking advantage, with fraud, it's I lay the blame almost squarely on those organizations and on those individuals who are administering the programs, not necessarily on the people who are, they are complicit in the fraud.
Well,
Um,
you're talking about, well, one example of what you're talking about is, again, going back to Minnesota, Minneapolis, where you have a statewide fraud largely perpetrated by the Somali American community, which, to me, an American, is so offensive. I mean, not only are you not grateful to the country that is
it is
accepting.
offensive to me as an immigrant as well.
Yeah, and it should be. It should be. And the thing that is not often done in these immigration conversations is a discussion of legal immigration, which is what your family was a part of, and the illegal immigration that takes place and that exploded under the 4 years of Joe Biden. I mean, the root of this crisis that we have in the Minneapolises and the Chicagos and the Los Angeleses and the New Yorks of numbers, millions of illegal, undocumented aliens is the fact that Biden basically had an open door policy for 4 years of his administration, and millions of people, you can't blame them for taking advantage of facts on the ground, came across the board and across the border
And if I
illegally.
can just say, it was more than an open door policy. It was encouraged, and it was massively funded by the
Mm,
administration. So if it were only to say, hey, listen, we have no immigration rules, but you're on your own when you come here, that's one thing. But it was more than that. It was an encouragement and a massive funding. In other
to
words,
make that happen.
they were taking taxpayer dollars
Mm,
and funding these floods of illegal immigrants. And we know that the people came from all over the world. And my heart breaks for them because they all want, I
a
would say
better life.
most of
Right.
them want a better life. Some come, there's good people and bad people everywhere, obviously, but I mean, there's plenty of fraud in America without, even with local born people. But to invite people to come here and then play political football with them is insulting, is heartbreaking. The way that they, the journey is treacherous, the human trafficking. They are putting these people in harm's way with this kind of policy. So I just wanted to add that it is so much more than just opening the door to, whoever. It's
You're
really,
saying we created a magnet for them to come into the country illegally under Biden. And let me just speculate here and get your thoughts. Is this a political endeavor on the part of liberal Democrats that they want more voters. They assume automatically that these new migrants will eventually find their way on the voting rolls and eventually become voters for them.
I can't read their minds. I'm sure, I don't know who can read minds, but it sure seems that way.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
the outcome, if you have a framework
Hmm.
where you count congressional representatives based on population, not necessarily based on number of citizens within that population, then it sure seems that way.
Absolutely. And of course the burden is not just limited to having illegal aliens in your country, but it is the drawdown on services, be it medical services, be it the schools. It is a real tragedy, and it's tragic that, basically working class and poor people in these urban centers are the ones that are going to have to bear, are the ones that are bearing most of the burden of reduced services because of this phenomenon. Well, Elena, let's get to the solution orientation. As an immigrant yourself that came here the right way and went through what you and your family went through to actually become an American citizen, how can we step this process back? How do you agree with the Trump administration? Some would say the Trump administration's heavy-handed de-assimilation, if you will, or the removing of illegal aliens in the country, or do you think this needs a softer touch?
I think that there's no other way to do it. This is not a harsh touch. This is a softer touch. And the reason that it becomes um, that it appears to be harsh is because instead of supporting this kind of effort, instead of working together, not just with local law enforcement, but also with the local community, you have, unfortunately, an entire group of people who are, for to me, reasons that have nothing to do with the interest of their country or even their own personal interest, um, that stand in the way and that prevent law enforcement from doing their work.
Well, yeah, well, actively obstruct what law enforcement is doing. And look, God bless Miss Good for her death.
But she
Um,
shouldn't have been there.
well, that's the point. That's
She
the
should
point.
have been at home with her kids.
It's tragic that she had to lose her life, but the fact of the matter
Very
is that
heartbreaking,
she was
heartbreaking.
actively obstructing law enforcement endeavors. And it's so funny. I'm a this. I love American history, and when I think of the lack of cooperation and obstruction of these state governments, largely Democrat, with the federal government, I think about Reconstruction. And when the Republican-led Reconstruction effort was made nationally, how Southern Democrat states actively obstructed, even using murder and lynchings to obstruct Reconstruction law, which was the law of the land. And it is happening all over again, ironically, with Democrat state governments that are obstructing this process as well. What is your prediction? I mean, you and I are not crystal ball readers, but in the few minutes we have left, what is your prediction for how this is going to turn out by 2028, 2029, when President Trump steps down from being president of the United States and hands the baton to his successor? What is the immigration picture going to look like?
Oh boy, isn't that the, $10 million question? Um, I am an optimist when it comes to this country. I think that the good will prevail and reason and common sense will prevail. The question is when. What is the term eventually? What is the calendar date for that? And I think we don't know that.
Well, I'll give you some optimism and a real example. There was a Chicago chief, incidentally, African American, who came out and said, ICE is doing their damn job. You just need to get the heck out of the way. And
That's
I thought that
exactly
was
right.
so brave. This guy should be lauded all over the media as a superstar, and he's not been, and that is tragic. But it's a hopefully it's a sign of things to come because, and
And
I
by
don't
the
blame him. I
and
mean,
by the
he's
way,
got to deal with this crap on the ground.
the people that are actually impacted and affected by this are not out there demonstrating.
That's
It's
right.
the people that have bizarre
No, you're
concept
right. You're right.
of what it is that they want that has nothing to do with, with what the actual immigrants, what
Those
the
that
actual
that
immigrants want.
yeah, those that are suffering from a reduction of services and overcrowding and the like are white poor, African American, and Hispanics. Those that are protesting tend to be middle class white people, like, again, God bless her, rest in peace, Miss Good in Minneapolis.
And people, a lot of the times when, I engage in conversations about immigration, they um, kind of it's a wide understanding of what an immigrant is, and they conflate, all these different types of immigrants, and they talk about, well, who will pick our crops, you know, as if, and that upsets me tremendously because, think about when they said, well, when if slavery were to be abolished,
Absolutely.
who will pick our crops? Well, there are plenty of people who can come here legally. But of course, for that to happen, Congress has to take action and Congress has to revise laws. And most importantly, when and if Congress ever gets its act together to revise the laws, they have to figure out a way to implement those laws. But until that happens, this is the kind of chaos that has turned immigrants into political footballs, from administration to administration, and my heart aches for them on so many levels. Um, on the other hand, they are not necessarily the ones that are creating their hardships. Their hardships were created for them, and they are just victims of this. And I do hope that the people who are protesting realize that they have to work together in order to make the lives of these people and their own lives better.
Absolutely. And not to mention lives of the American citizenry better as well.
Yeah.
Well,
We are
Elena,
a country
thank
of
you.
immigrants, and we need to stay a country of immigrants because a lot of Americans, and we've talked about this, don't appreciate what they have. And if the Americans would just appreciate a little bit more what they have, I've traveled around the world and I've gone to every country I visit. I come to visit the American embassy abroad in every country I visit. And the lines to get visas into America are around the corner, no matter what time of day you come to the embassy. So we definitely are a magnet for people who want to live free, people who want opportunities, people who want a better life. And many of those people are very grateful. I am thankful that there is some kind of a recourse to get at least, some of the people who we don't want here to get out, but we shouldn't brush everyone with a broad stroke, that's for sure.
Well, on that note and hopeful note, our broadcast has come to an end. We're going to have you on again, Elena. You're a fabulous guest. Love having you on. And thank you so much for what you do. And it is a blessing to have you in the United States. You are definitely added to our sum total over
Thank you,
your
Niger Innis, and you're fabulous. And thank you so much for being on the right side of things.
You're most welcome. And we're going to sign off as we always do with my father, who you were a big fan of, Roy Ennis, longtime chairman of CORE. And he said, Niger,
May he
operate
rest in
your
peace.
life always with the TLC principle. And I said, oh, what? You mean tender love and care? He goes, no, I'll give you tender love and care, but my TLC is truth, logic, and courage. And
Your
with that,
father was a hero. He was brilliant.
Thank you so much, Elena.
You're in his
That
footsteps for sure.
all my pleasure. And that ends another episode of Niger Innis Presents the Trump Revolution, a part of the TvAbraham Network. I want to thank my guest, Elena Suhir, and the production team for putting this all together. Thank you, Elena. Bye now.
Thank you. Goodbye.